In 1964, an early AI called Student could solve algebra word problems. In 1967, another AI called Lisa could converse with humans and was one of the first to take the Turing test. In 1997, Deep Blue had a six-game chess match against world champ Garry Kasparov.
Kasparov has resigned.
In 2011, Watson could understand natural language,
Watson, who is Franz Liszt? You are
competing in the
What
quiz
is
show
violin?
Jeopardy,
Good. Who is the church lady?
and even beating champ.
Watson.
In 2020, SoundRaw could generate music. In fact, you've already been listening to it. In 2021, DALI could make art, photos, chimps, worlds, and even gods. In 2022, ChatGPT could talk to you as an expert in any field, as a writer, a doctor, a coder, and even passed MBA exams. Now in 2024, Sora can create people, videos, animations, movies, evidence, and even history. Most AI experts believe that AI will reach human level intelligence by 2060. But I think it's within the decade. At one point, an AI will be able to create another AI better than a human can. And that AI will create an even better AI, and so on, until we get the birth of a god. Humans will soon become the second smartest creatures in the universe. By 2030, AI could replace 800 million jobs worldwide. You might think that new jobs will be created, but that requires a lot of retraining, and there simply aren't enough for all of us. Physical jobs are safe for now, but don't get too comfy. If we don't do anything, we're gonna see poverty at a scale we've never seen before. We have enough resources for everyone, it's just a matter of governance. So, what do we do when people lose jobs? Do we just give them free money? Well, yeah, actually. Let's give a certain amount of money, say $1,000, to every person, every month. It doesn't matter who you are, the money belongs to you, just for being a human being. This is the idea of UBI, or Universal Basic Income. Universal means that it comes with no conditions, regardless of whether you're employed or not, poor or rich. Even if you lose your job, even if your investments crash, even if a flood destroys your house, you will be okay. UBI ensures that you have enough money to eat and sleep. Imagine a utopia where the world actually gives a damn about you, where you feel loved and equal to those around you. Poor people will be able to afford food, housing, and even education to improve their lives. Stealing food and other items won't be necessary, and so few people will go to jail. A review study of the impacts of UBI on health, which went through 21 other studies, found that UBI can reduce people's likelihood of being sick by 27%. The poor were able to spend on healthcare, and most people's mental states became far healthier. With UBI, there's this feeling of stability, and with that feeling, people will be able to take more risks. They'll be able to quit jobs they hate and actually do what they love. They'll start more companies and try crazy ideas. If we want to support families, we could give each family half the UBI amount for every child. They would be able to afford education, and more children could go to school. We could even give that money directly to 16 and 17-year-olds, which would really help them be independent. The elderly will be able to retire in peace with whatever savings they have left. All that's amazing, but where will the government get the money? A UBI of $1,000 a month in America would cost $3.1 trillion a year. Printing money would just lead to inflation, so we need to get it from somewhere else. The German Institute for Economic Research simulated a UBI of 1,200 euros per month in Germany and found that it can indeed be financed. 75% of the basic income pays for itself. This consists of increasing income taxes around 10%, which would finance 42% of the UBI. 83% of people will still get more money from the UBI than they give through increased taxes. So it really is a tax cut for the majority. Social welfare programs give free food and shelter to the poor, which is wonderful and is still needed at times. But with money, you get freedom to choose what is best for you. Social welfare also has a lot of administration costs, as they monitor each person. These programs, including unemployment benefits, child benefits, and more, can be replaced with UBI, paying for 12%. Similarly, abolishing other tax privileges pays for 11%. A better tax administration that accounts for tax fraud can finance 4%. Each family member will have their own income, spend more, and lead to another 3% in tax revenue. Poor people will have more money to spend, increasing consumption and growing the economy. This would add another 3% in tax revenue. The remaining 25% can be financed by taxing the rich. This means we redistribute money from the hands that don't need it to those who actually do. We can do this using tax brackets. The first 11k of your income is taxed 10%. The remaining amount up till 45k is taxed 12%. This increases up till 580k, over which your money is taxed 37%. We can raise the income taxes at these levels that only affect the rich, raising them to 50% or higher. We could also introduce an inheritance tax so that wealth doesn't stay in the family. We can increase the corporate tax so that companies that earn big share big. The rich will still stay rich, but it'll be harder for them to hold on to that wealth. The German Institute website even has a configurator where you can simulate your own UBI. You can choose the amount of basic income, choose how to finance it, what taxes to impose, and see its effects on the world. If you believe UBI is just too impractical to finance, then I propose this. Let's pin the UBI amount to taxes, such that the government only pays out a UBI amount equal to the taxes it receives. We can start by increasing taxes by 1% and pay out a UBI of that amount. We can keep increasing taxes until people start getting dissatisfied. At that point, UBI from those taxes will be the highest amount that we can sustain. Even if that amount is $10, a lot of poor people will be grateful for it. Let's look at some UBI experiments in the real world. In 2008, in a Namibian village in Africa, a UBI of about $13 for every citizen with no conditions was introduced. It was funded initially by donors, including the AIDS Foundation, and later by tax revenues. The village had 1,000 inhabitants, of which more than 60% lived on less than $1 a day. Unemployment rate was over 70%, 42% of children were malnourished, and few children attended school. With the UBI, people were able to invest in resources such as chickens and tools. They could feed their kids, malnourishment plunged from 42% to 10%. They could afford schooling, school attendance rose to 92%, and there were fewer thieves. You see, UBI can do wonders if financed right. In 2010, Iran had an outdated system of subsidizing fuel and oil, which was becoming way too expensive to sustain. So they removed the subsidies and compensated the people by providing a basic income of $40 per person for 75 million people, becoming the first country to have a nationwide basic income. Poverty and inequality dropped, fuel and oil usage dropped, employment stayed pretty much the same. After a few years, to save costs, this basic income targeted poorer households. Inflation started to rise at 1% per month. Poverty and inequality increased as well, and sanctions on Iran only made it worse, and eventually their currency collapsed. Iran had its own problems, but inflation is a challenge of UBI. As more people get richer, store owners will raise prices because people will be able to afford it. Rent and housing will similarly increase. Inflation is just a result of a growing economy, but we can handle it by putting policies such as an item price increase cap or a rent increase cap to limit it. In 2019, in Stockton, California, a UBI of $500 for the 125 residents at or under median income with no conditions was introduced. This 2-year project was called SEED and was funded by donors, including the Economic Security Project. Payments were done with a debit card, of which 37% was spent on food, 22% on home goods and clothes, the remaining on gas, electricity, and water, and less than 1% was spent on alcohol or tobacco. People don't just waste all their money on drinks and drugs. People were less depressed and anxious. They got healthier too. They were twice as likely to get employment. They were able to pay off their debts. Independent researchers conducted a study and found the same improvements. UBI is just that good. Here's a similar idea to UBI. We currently tax people based on their income. The more you earn, the more money that is taxed. But what if we set an income level above which you are taxed, but below which you are negatively taxed. In other words, the government owes you. This is the idea of
Income of
negative income
3,000.
tax,
I would
spread
have an
by Milton
exemption of
Friedman.
3,000. I would pay
Negative
more.
income tax is a form of basic income and achieves all the beautiful things that UBI does. However, UBI makes people feel more stable because they'll get used to this feeling of a steady flow of income, regardless of how rich they are. Under UBI, companies will realize their employees are receiving additional money from the government, which means that they can afford to pay their employees less. So we'll see a lowering in salaries, but most of us should still be richer than before. Since salaries will be lower, companies will be incentivized to hire people. What's amazing is that employees will gain huge control over their bosses. They can quit and shift anytime, so bosses will be forced to treat their employees better. They can fight for fewer hours, and unattractive work will have to pay better. In 1970, in the US, there were several negative income tax experiments, and they showed a 5% decline in hours worked. Other experiments showed that new mothers and teenagers who supported their families worked fewer hours. If you're afraid there will be no incentive to work, don't worry. All the experiments discussed show that people want to work, and those that work less actually use their time for things that actually matter. Ads are a redistribution of money. Companies such as NordVPN, BetterHelp, Squarespace, and Brilliant share some of their income with YouTubers. Speaking of which, this episode was sponsored by no one, because I'm new here. With UBI, YouTubers won't promote things they don't care about. People with office jobs could tell their bosses exactly how they feel. We'd have a more truthful society because we will all be treated equally. UBI doesn't benefit everybody. The rich will lose money, and to avoid this, they will try their best to evade taxes by moving their money to a tax free country or even leaving the country altogether. To limit this, we could tax the money leaving the country using tax packets that only affect the rich. The rich may convert their cash into assets such as stocks, art, or luxury items, in which case we could increase the taxes on all of them. Tracking money will be a challenge, but it's just a matter of governance. As AI replaces jobs, UBI won't be a choice. And when it does happen, what will humans do? We will be free to do whatever we want. We'll fall in love with art, music, dance, sports, and knowledge. But in exchange, we lose meaning. We no longer have to work for our survival, something that we've been doing for 3.8 billion years. We may even voluntarily work to feel fulfilled. Do you think a UBI would work? Let me know down below. And goodbye, friend.